I'm going to be your lead here today. Unfortunately, Rachel Rose was not able to join us, but we look forward to having her back again soon. I am a sex, love, and relationship coach and reality guide, and I have a passion in helping people move out of their old toxic patterns, belief systems, narratives, so that they can move into the thriving connections and relationships they desire to have with others and within their own being. Our topic today is body wisdom, and personally, this is something that I absolutely love and slightly terrifies me at the same time, because even though it's something I've been working with um, significantly for the last 5 years, there's still a lot of communications I'm working through receiving in my own body and understanding that body language, I'll say. And I don't always know what those means, but it's a learning process in that. And hopefully what we cover today can help you drop into having a better understanding of how to work with your own body, how to open those lines of communication, because your body is just this huge, vast pool of wisdom about what it is you want to be experiencing in the world. Like what what creates safety for you, what creates pleasure, what creates love, all these things, and we get so disconnected from it over time. So where we're going to start out is why we stop listening. And typically the reasons we stop listening come from these different narratives that tell us we can't trust our body, um, it's not safe to be in our bodies, other people's other people's narratives, needs, those things are more important, and those get ingrained at really, really young ages. There's a lot of research that's been coming out the last couple of decades around this, in how the body holds on to trauma. Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score, or you look at a lot of Peter Levine's work, Gabor Mate. A lot of their work has evolved to looking at how all these narratives and beliefs kind of separate us from connecting with our own body intuition, the wisdom that lives there, because it it equated to a lack of safety in the world around us, right? And that could have been as a kid or in your family, like you go to family events and you don't really feel like hugging a relative, whether that be an aunt, uncle, or anybody. And there's an expectation from that social group around you that you're giving a hug, even though it's a no in your own body. Um, that can come along with things like body shape, which I know is a big issue for many, many female bodies in our society. It's something I struggled with a lot myself throughout my life, in having a big skew in my body dysmorphia compared to how I see myself versus how the world views my body. In that, males also experience this, and I feel like this is becoming more prevalent over the last couple decades, where that's coming out more and more, where there's so much shame held around our physical bodies and them not being good enough, them not being attractive enough, all these other spaces that keep telling us these narratives that our body or we need to be something other than exactly what we are. There's also shame that goes around the emotions and sensations that arise in our bodies. This can be when you're a little kid exploring sexually, like even if that's in solo play, it's very normal for children to explore their bodies and feel into the things that feel good. And a lot of time that comes with stroking their genitalia. There's a lot of parents who aren't comfortable with that space and they will overreact, and then it creates this seed of shame that they should not be feeling certain things as that child or in their body, and it can create this whole cascade that leads to shutdown in the system, because if they feel that shame, they're not accepted, they're not lovable, they may be exiled, which is that very big piece of the primal consciousness is what we'll call it. It's the very like animal instinctual, which is highly related to what comes up in the body senses. That's we like to think as humans that somehow we are above other animals because we have all this mental capacity that has expanded. But at the very base level, we are still animals. And those signals in our bodies carry a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom. One of my favorite examples comes from Peter Levine's work. And in that, he ends up talking about the ways through, we'll call it domestication, because it actually will show up more in domesticated animals as well. But through this domestication, we stop listening to our own body's intuition. And that's, let's say there is an animal in a stress cycle, a deer, and it's out in a field, a predator goes to chase it, the deer runs. And the deer will run, it goes into this flight mode until it hits a point that it feels safe enough that it has evaded the predator. And then it'll go stand in this field or wherever that safe space is and just shake. And this is a release of that excess energy, the excess cortisol, adrenaline, and getting it out, literally moving out of the body. And that's, you'll notice like when young babies go into crying cycles or anger or anything like that, like they will get angry enough that their body is shaking, or they will start crying enough that their body will shake. And as we get older, whether it's what's modeled for us that we're told we shouldn't be doing this thing or we shouldn't be feeling this thing, whatever it may be, we lose touch with how to actually release that energy. And in my experience, that actually led to a lot of this chronic pain that got held in my own body that I had no idea what it was from. The very best example of pain that was consistently held in my body came from a car accident that I experienced in my early 20s. And in this car accident, very, very viable reasons for having the pain and injuries I did initially. I worked in massage, so like I was very familiar with body work even at that point in time, but I ended up with significant low back and sciatic issues, issues with nervy pain that would shoot down my right arm and kind of cause this numb, achy sensation. I started getting migraines for the first time in my life. I very rarely even ever had headaches before that point in time. And like I said, very viable reason, very physically based instant for why those injuries showed up in my body, why that pain was showing up in my body. The thing was, some of the spaces that got injured healed fairly quickly, probably within a few months, and weren't much of an issue anymore. Other ones, it was years. Like I had chronic pain. It was a consistent thing where I was feeling it at least daily. Like, there may have been, like, every once in a while where it was like I had a day with less pain, but there was always physical pain in my body, no matter what I was doing from the point I was 21 and moving into into my 30s. I went through physical therapy. I got a TENS unit from my doctor. I was on pain medications, working in massage, or when I got back into working in massage, I actually started getting an hour and a half to 2 hour massage once a week. I worked at a chiropractor's office and could get free adjustments whenever I needed to. All of those things had different rates that they actually helped, but most of the time it was only helping within the span of a few hours or that day. The one thing that helped outside of that for a longer period of time was actually acupuncture, which, even with all the experience I had around massage, I was super skeptical of. In massage, there's acupressure, which is you're actually using those same acupuncture points in the body, but you're using pressure from your fingers to stimulate them, to relax those trigger points, to allow that energy to flow. So I was like, well, why would I need to stick needles in my body? Obviously, for me, there was probably a fear with having needles put into my body as well. But eventually, when I tried it, that was the thing that helped the most. It was the one thing I had tried. And this was over 15 years later that I finally took that route. And it would help for about 6 months. So great. Like, and in that, I also started feeling like I was gaining range of motion and flexibility back, which in all that 15 years, like, I had very minimal returns to connecting with my range of motion that I had before my car accident and general flexibility. Well, through all this process, yes, I found acupuncture, and that was my favorite modality outside of myself for finding relief from that chronic pain. The thing I found very interesting was once I got into the Vita program, it was the same year that COVID hit. And so I'm getting to go through this amazing, like, 1 year long coaching intensive work, which I honestly had no idea what coaching work was, or that how the psyche could play into the physical bodies in this way. And it's a lot more of where my understanding of body wisdom started to come forward outside the very, like, physical, tangible body that I had known for many years prior through massage work, through having this very rational, scientifically aimed mind. But in that I started doing this coaching work, I couldn't go to my acupuncturist at that point. COVID actually ended up putting her completely out of business. The place she was practicing shut down. And it came to this point where, in what's called body mapping, which is literally like you sit and your aim is to work with certain parts of the psyche, but you're doing that by recognizing sensations that show up in the body. Well, through this process, it would have been so easy, and it even popped up in, like, the back of my mind of, like, oh, you have this pain because of a car accident, like, you're looking, you're listening, you're not paying attention to the right thing, right? To me, that was my mind trying to be like, no, like, you know this. And I didn't, was the truth there, right? Because as I worked with mapping my system and actually allowing myself to feel into these sensations that my body just in or like my mind interpreted as pain, and that I knew where it came from, all these other narratives about my life started to come forward. I really didn't think a whole lot about it. I was just like, oh, this is interesting. Like, I ended up going into body mapping the sensations in my low back, and there was some interesting narratives that came up about like me being accepted into my family and like being somebody who's like lovable and acceptable in that space. At the time, I was working with a counselor and happened to tell her about this. I was like, yeah, it was an interesting experience. And she's like, oh, that's fascinating. I just went through a yoga training. And in this yoga training, they talk about how the low back in like Eastern based medicines or philosophies is very related with feeling accepted um, on like societal basis. Now that I know more, that would be very related to what's called the sacral chakra. And the sacral chakra is more based around social dynamics, which I had no idea about. If I had learned about it at that point in time, it wasn't anything I gave any sort of heed to. So I was like, oh, that's even more fascinating that this relates back to something I had no idea about existing as a particular space in my body, that there's other evidence for, other theories for. Then there's another time, right, where I'm working through this practice and all these sensations started showing up through my right arm and through my right shoulder. And it ended up coming down to where it was highly linked with my confidence, which, even if you cognitively think about, if you look at somebody and you're like, that person is confident, a lot of that goes through their shoulder space. It's that like relaxed but very upright and open posture. And it's just, it became more and more interesting and more fascinating as I started working with all these different spaces and noticing that there are very distinct narratives that show up, and that's these things are continuing to hold in your body and once again not release that stored up energy or that held space, because there's a lack of safety in allowing them to flow and allowing them to just be. And again, these are things that can get put into the workings of who we are, what we can, shouldn't be from very, very young ages. And then a lot of the time we continue to build on these narratives because we've already had some of our filters, our main filters set at a very young age for how we're taking in the world and how we know it works. Well, when we go with that knowing, like, you end up focusing and you end up seeing and you end up experiencing the things you know. I want to get into some of the impacts that this can have. Like, obviously, you got to hear about how mine led to um, chronic pain. It can also lead to other diseases and illnesses. There was a really amazing talk that I got to listen to by Gaber Mate, and I always forget the one. There's only one disease he listed off, and it's something that's neurological that people are born with, possibly muscular dystrophy. Do not quote me on that because it could be wrong. But there was only this one disease that he has come across in all of his research that he did not find very direct links to why it was showing up related to trauma. Obviously, there are other biological factors, there are environmental, there are genetics, right? There's lifestyle, which would file under environmental as well. But when you get into that, like if you don't have these distinct areas of holding in the body already, then that allows more of this free processing and this room for those other things to process and move through, compared to if you have that holding, it's going to keep things more stagnant in your system, not allowing them to process, keeping that locked down. And the more and more that gets held and repressed in that area, to me, the more it screamed in my body. And the way I relate to it screaming is my body hurt. And that's what pain is. It's a signal that something isn't right, that something needs to be addressed, that there's something that needs healing or rest or to move away from, whatever that may be. And it shows up differently in different areas of the body. But regardless, it shows up. I would say one of the next steps, like especially if like in the instances like it has become so unsafe to be with that level of pain, of shame, of connecting with that part of yourself, to me, that next step is typically numbness or a level of dissociation, because it takes, it's kind of like going through the tearing of fight, flight, freeze in the nervous system. Like when you get down into to numbness or dissociation, whether that is physical sensation in your body or emotional states, like that is, we'll call it a lower vibration, because it is the space of holding still. Act or fight and flight require some level of action in the nervous system, right? And that's when you're actively feeling pain, like there's a desire for action, even if you don't know what that action or appropriate action is to help resolve that pain at that point in time. I had a really powerful experience, and I didn't even really know there was anything to work on in this part of my body, but I kept getting this strange, dull sensation. I really don't know how to address it besides that, but it was all this work with the womb space in my body. But I kept getting, it was this like very thin line, almost like a thread, and then two little tug points that landed almost about uh, where my ovaries would lay in my body. But I was like, this is interesting. Like I want to check this out. And I went into this whole coaching session with one of my peers in training. And this is one of my very first experiences with inner child work. And I didn't even know if what I was working with was an inner child part. Um, I was just like, well, this is the assignment that we're supposed to be guiding each other through. And this is the part of my body that keeps calling my attention. Well, through this process, like we did the body mapping, and I couldn't connect with that sensation in my body, even though it had been showing up throughout the last week. My whole right leg ended up actually becoming very painful and hot. And in the body mapping, you can go into visual imaging. So, like, you may end up seeing an image of a person or a color or a shape, other symbolic pieces. You can also end up hearing thoughts or hearing other voices. It's just this space of being open and receptive to see what flows through in association with these different sensations that show up in the body. And this one, it was this like older school marm looking woman with her hair in a tight bun and a ruler in her hand, smacking it, glasses, very, very stern face, and like just this sense of like, you don't even want to go there. And like that had me and my my co-coach come to a complete stop. And she's like, "This doesn't seem like an inner child piece." And I was like, "I agree." And so we were sitting there trying to figure out, do we even proceed? Because I'm not able to connect with that part in my body. And literally, as we're having this conversation, that area at my low belly just flares. And I was like, oh, wait, I can feel it now. The stuff in my leg mellowed out. And then we dropped into the practice, and it was really phenomenal because it ended up being an inner child piece. It ended up being a narrative I did not consciously know was even held in my body about my sexuality. And it was this space where I got to see this little girl version of me. And she was so very uncomfortable being in her body. I didn't know why. Like some of the first parts of this practice is just describing what you're seeing in front of you, if you're getting that image or what you're feeling about what's coming up. It wasn't until the next step, which is where you can actually go and take the seat as this part of yourself, where all of this started coming together and making sense. And that's, I sat down in this seat as this little girl part. And it was kind of like all the muscles and nerves started randomly firing through my vulva, through my vaginal canal, along all these spaces related with my reproductive organs. And the whole thing felt so very uncomfortable in my body. And it had me realize how uncomfortable this little girl had felt in her body. And this whole narrative came forward of a point in time when I was a little kid, and there was that personal exploration of my body and consensually with another little girl, and my mom had caught us. And in that, I want to say she, as far as what I've heard compared to other people's experiences at least, like she did a good job. Like she took me to a bookstore and gave me resources to like, oh, this is sex, right? But that little girl part of me very distinctly got the message that it was not okay for her to feel those sensations in her body, that those feelings, those experiences were for something between adults. And so when those sensations kept showing up, it created this space that felt really unsafe for her to exist in my body. And I had actually gone through so much of trying to block that on a very subconscious level to avoid the feelings of shame that were associated with that now, that I actually had this space of numbness within my body that I didn't even realize I wasn't feeling or experiencing, because it had been since I was probably about 6 or 7 years old that I had even really felt that space in my body fully. And the thing that was even more fascinating was, so after sitting down with this little girl, like at the end of the practice, you can move back to the seat as your adult self. You then reflect what you got to see, experience. You can create a new home for that inner child part of yourself, a new role, um, how it's going to show up in your life. And this falls into a lot of what I call aspecting work, but there's a lot of threads to me that link very heavily to a brand of therapy called internal family systems, and that's IFS. But after that, it was fascinating because it was like my sexuality had been turned back on again. Like I felt sensations down there over the next few weeks, almost on like it was on hyperdrive. It reminded me of the point in time I would have been like a teenager and hearing teenagers talk about like how horny they are pretty much all the time. Um, but it was really fascinating to notice that just like I hadn't done any body manipulation on myself. I hadn't received any medications. I hadn't received any injections. I hadn't received needles stuck into my skin. Like it was working with these mind body pieces, the inner child part, other shadow parts, whatever they may be, to create this space of like love and acceptance, even for the things that feel really uncomfortable or that we interpret as feeling painful, that then allowed this space for more opening and more connection. And it's, I don't know how to describe it beyond that, is that when we work with these parts, it creates those spaces of connection. And that's the more connection we create within our own systems, the more like acceptance and understanding and love we can bring to those spaces, the easier it gets to create connections with other bodies. And there's a lot of unpacking that can go into those spaces. Again, it can be a lifetime of getting to have this experience that your body isn't safe, that you can't trust yourself, that you can't trust your intuition, that like your body is unlovable based on other people's standards or expectations, all of these things. And it's, to me, it's so out of alignment with what the actual truth of it is, because it's the more we come into alignment with bringing that presence to ourselves, acknowledging that like our experiences, our needs, our boundaries, our wants, our desires, like all those things are valid. But the more we do that, the more capacity we actually have to bring those spaces to other people as well. Because we're no longer like sitting there fighting ourselves. And it takes so much less energy once you stop fighting. It's really phenomenal. Let's see. I think one of the things I wanted to touch on, and this goes back to some of the other talks Rachel Rose and I have had, is some of those longer term impacts of not listening. So we have chronic pain, numbness, body dissociation, disease and illness, Um, I want to say that this can lead into a lot of those spaces of addiction in, or like trying to self-medicate, but in ways that are actually end up being abusive to our bodies, right? It's where it starts creating that space of it no longer serving us. Like at one point in time, it did that job and it was serving. Like it was serving a need. Like it was helping you escape when like it was not safe to be there. Like I want to give whatever parts help a person escape that validation, because there can be there is times where that is appropriate for people and times where it does save people's lives. And I want to give the body wisdom that even exists in addiction the credit it deserves. It doesn't mean you have to stay in that place. It doesn't mean it continues to be serving. But each person is the only one who can decide when and where that space is for them. Um, I want to say it can also really, really heavily lead to those spaces of highly codependent behavior in relationships, um, as well as seeking seeking all this external validation. And that's, once again, we get taught from a very, very young age that like the external world, the group around us, is the thing, the space that like is going to keep us safe. But that's not always the case. Like as we've talked about, a lot of the wounds that like come about in our belief systems and us not believing we're enough or lovable or acceptable come out of those spaces of relationship with others. So there's that play, and that's coming back to that core of self-love. Like you are worthy and deserving. Like you are beautiful. Even if you're a hot crazy mess that day and like you just need to cry, or you need to go dance, or you need to sleep half the day, like you have trust within your own system and can take the time to listen to your own system to find what's really right for you. And that validation of what's right or wrong, acceptable, unacceptable, whatever it is, it can stop coming from all the spaces around you. Let's see, is there anything else? I'm just checking notes. So I think that next step would be going into how do we learn to listen to our bodies again? And there are many, many avenues for this. I'd say one of the biggest like first steps I would recommend is being able to find a resource within your own body mind. And this means that like you are able to connect to a place within your body, or it can be a space in your imagination, right? That feels safe and calm for you. And I want to kind of give a little little step by step here on how to do this because it's something we can all find connection to. It may be you need more help finding it or more practice to find it. And that's where bringing in a professional, as far as a coach or a therapist, some other form of body worker, can be helpful. But you're the only person who can decide if that is the right path for you or not. So, as far as finding a resource within your physical body, one of the easiest ways to do that is to just go lay down in a space or sit comfortably and quietly like you would with meditation. And in this, you're not trying to make thoughts or anything go away. You're literally just going to take some nice deep breaths down into your low belly. And after you get the feeling that like you are present in your body, you're going to allow yourself to scan through your body. And when I imagine this, I kind of imagine like one of the Xerox scanners going through my body, like that rod of light. And you can either go from the top of your head down to your toes or from your toes to the top of your head. But you're just scanning through your physical body to see if you can find a point in your body, like even if it's the size of like a grain of sand, or it can be like as big as like an arm or a leg or your whole torso. Like it's different for everyone. You're just seeing what you can find that feels generally warm, comfortable, relaxed, loving, even. It's a space of comfort that feels like 100% safe for you in your body. Another way of doing this is getting into, like, I recommend just start with the body scan, see what you can find, right? If you're not having anything come up there, give yourself the challenge of imagining a space. And you want this to be, we're going to say, as energetically clear of a space as possible. Like you may love the river, but if you had an incident at the river that was super scary for you or carried a really high um, emotional impact that creates a lack of safety, like probably need to pick a different spot than the river. It doesn't have to be a place in the real world. This can be a completely imagined space. Mine, for me, tends to be sitting at the ocean side. I've known my entire life that being in or near the ocean is a ridiculously calm space for me. It's where I feel grounded. It's where I naturally feel the most myself. Yours may be in the forest, yours may be in a desert, yours may be sitting in a bathtub. Like it can look like whatever it does for you. But being able to find that space, whether it's in your imagination or whether it's in your physical body, is a huge resource within you. And that to me is one of the more foundational ones. Another type of resourcing is grounding, and that can be the process of you imagine roots growing out of the bottom of your feet and going down to the center of the earth, right? Like feeling yourself here on the planet. It can also be connecting to your five senses. So one of the things I got to learn through breathwork courses around, I don't think it's called grounding in that instance, but it's when somebody's having a dysregulation or an overwhelm come up, an imbalance in their nervous system and they're really feeling out of sorts, and you can tell that there's a dysregulation as the person guiding that space, you can have them connect with high focus to their current physical surroundings, as long as their current physical surroundings are safe. I mean, if they're like have stepped out in the middle of the street and there's a bus headed at their physical body and they're about to get hit by the bus, it's not the right space to ground them in that exact moment so they feel soothed in that, get them out from in front of the bus, right? And now that they're back on the sidewalk, they may have stuff coming up in their nervous system. Ultimately, they're now in a safe space. They can look around and find 5 things that are in the space around them and identify their color. Or if you have essential oils or something for them to smell and then describing what comes up with that smell. Same with the focus on taste. One of my favorite ones I came across recently, because I find myself um, moving my fingers over things pretty consistently anyway, is rubbing 2 fingertips together and continuing to notice for the nuanced sensation to the point where you can feel your fingerprints. But you can bring in any of the senses and play around with it for yourself, for which ones are easier for you to tap into, which ones are harder for you to tap into, right? Another great resource, I recommend it once you have gotten the actual finding a resource within your system down, because then you always have this place of safety to come back to, right? This space that feels good, that feels calm, that feels loving, that feels holding in the way of a hug, not in the way of being strangled. um, it's body mapping and body attunement, and there's some really phenomenal resources for this. Some of my favorites come from somatic work, and I I cannot speak to how much wisdom and how much beauty comes out of the space of actually working with your own somatic body and being able to be fully present in those spaces. It's it is a wondrous journey to embark on and to bring presence to. But body mapping is kind of similar to what we did in even finding the resource. It can be as simple as doing a fine-tuned scan of your body, either from your toes to the top of your head or from the top of your head down to your toes. Um, I definitely recommend that you are finding finding other resources if you want to start exploring what's there in pain sensations, or working with shadow work in these ways, just because there's not a lot of resources. In my experience, there hasn't been a lot of modeling for listening to what's coming up in these spaces, and having a mentor or having somebody to guide you in that space can come in very, very valuably, because it's it's this person to validate the yeah, this space is normal, or this is really beautiful, whatever those things are, to help you create a healthy curiosity with these parts that you had previously disconnected with. Um, there, again, it doesn't matter if that resource is a book, it could be a set of guided meditations, it can be a coach or therapist or a breathwork class or a yoga class, whatever it is. I'd recommend finding somebody who has experiences in playing with those spaces and like can help guide you. Um, Another great one, and I recommend this to anyone ever because it is so valuable. It's coming to body love and self-care practices. A very simple one that you can do every single day, takes less than 5 minutes, is creating a mirror practice for yourself. And in this mirror practice, what you're going to do is just when you go up and you see your reflection in a mirror, you are very specifically going to focus on finding something that you love, that you are seeing. Like it can be a freckle or a mole or like the way the color of your left eye looks. Like I don't care what it is, but a lot of the time, especially with the body shame piece of it, there can be such a strong narrative for focusing on the things we don't find perfect and that need to be improved and we need to fix. And when we do that, it brings our own self narrative, our own self worth down, and has us fall into disconnection with our own body, needing outside validation, um, and those spaces of potentially like addiction and codependency and all that whole cascade. Um, Self care practices can be giving yourself baths. My biggest recommendation is like if you find something that feels good for your body to do, if you try stretching and your body likes the feel of a stretch, like do that. Move into that. Like try more stretches. If you like dancing, even if you are scared of dancing in front of other people, like do that. Like even if it's just a little bit of curiosity, like if you like moving your voice, if you like singing, even if you don't want to sing in front of other people, find spaces and ways to do that. Like there are always avenues for you to explore movement in your own body. It may mean that, like, based on how safe you feel expressing that part of yourself, you need to create safety in other ways. Like, you need to go into your bedroom and lock the door. I personally, for years, was terrified of dancing in front of other people, but I so wanted to dance. And I would go into my bathroom at my parents' house because it was the one door I had that I could lock. And I would just dance for hours in the bathroom with headphones in. But it felt good to finally let my body move in that way, right? Um, if you like yoga, if you like Pilates, like if you like rock climbing, whatever it is, if you like floating in a body of water, like go take baths, go to a pool, like go to the ocean. Self care to me, it's those spaces where you're doing the things that feel good in your body and for your body. Uh, Again, if you find yourself getting into this sort of work and you want a mentor, right? You feel like you need more help, like you're not able to resource, that you need more one or like hands-on work. that you would benefit from doing this in a relational space. Because again, most of those old narratives and beliefs are formed in relationships. It can also be hugely beneficial to create healing for those in relationships. With a professional, you're going to get somebody, hopefully, who has training in how to hold that space, how to model healthy relationship dynamics. Like one of the top ways our nervous system learns from the point in time we are babies is through modeling, through witnessing how the world around us operates, and then doing that, right? It doesn't matter if it's walking, it doesn't matter if it's talking. Like that's like those initial sounds a lot of the times that babies start forming, it's starting that mimicry using those mirror neurons to mimic the world around us. So if you need to, seek a coach or a therapist. If you don't feel like you have resources or know how to find those, you can reach out to me through a DM or through email. You can sign up with me for a free discovery call, and we can sit down and figure out what sort of resources may best help serve you. Whether you want to work with me or you don't feel called to work with me, but like you would like that resource, I am happy to provide that because I have this whole beautiful network of other coaches and therapists and professionals who I've gotten into contact through doing this work. So I am happy to serve you in that space. Um, yeah, so other thing is movement, allowing your body to move. Like even if you think that movement seems weird, right? Because it doesn't fall under our domesticated animal conditioning. Um, like let your body shake if it needs to. Like, and maybe once again, you have to remove yourself to what feels like a safer space. That's okay. But finding ways to help release that stored energy and in soothing ways for your body, because you don't need to create other trauma or validate the old narratives over and over again. Um, as a side note on the therapy part, and I had touched on it before, some of my favorite work with dropping into body wisdom is coming around to the idea of aspecting work, parts work, or IFS therapy, internal family systems. And that's because it's creating this space where, to me, like we're not rejecting anything as like being bad or wrong. It's creating these spaces of acceptance, understanding, and love, which creates more of an openness. And like maybe the part of you that craves drinking, right? Like that's not serving anymore. But to me, it's not about having to get rid of this part. This part's trying to do a job for you. It may not even particularly like its job, it just doesn't know how else to do it. And so in creating that new connection with that piece and actually communicating with that part of you, you can then potentially repurpose it in a completely different way that it actually feels like excited about and you feel excited about. And then it's more of this space of like you're creating an internal family. You are connecting to like this inner world and community that builds who you are. And you get to kind of take the seat as that like leader, that sovereign being, the authentic self, the higher self, whatever you want to call it, and step into that leadership for your life, your reality, like what your journey gets to be from here on out. Um, and I think that's it for now. I want to thank anyone listening in. That's body wisdom is such a fascinating topic, and I think it's really one of those foundational pieces that we get so far removed from in our life that like when we can come back to this base of self-love and connection within our own being, that it makes it so much easier for those other connections, the right jobs, the money, the children, whatever it may be, the traveling, the abundance. It makes it easier for those things to flow in. And I still haven't figured out the rational scientific reason why that works. But I'll keep working at that. And when I get a better grasp on it, like I will try to communicate that best I can. Anyhow, it was wonderful to be here with you today or at any point in the future when you're listening. And until next time.